So, Rich, I'd like to start off with the big news coming out of Dove Valley, which is Von Miller coming into Broncos headquarters to not just see, talk to his current teammates and what have you, but there's a lot of speculation saying that he came in to possibly renegotiate his contract with new GM George Paton. What are your thoughts about that?
Until the details come out, you really don't know. For all you know, he's there cleaning out his locker. I joke, but at the same time, we really don't know what's going on there. I'd hope to see him back on some kind of a restructured and extension of sorts. I kind of threw around numbers on Twitter. If you don't follow me, handle down. Hang on, right there. In terms of based on the JJ Watt contract. So I'm thinking his number is probably going to land somewhere around the 16 to 17 million average kind of per year, as it were. That's where I kind of think he's going to end up. Slightly lower than his cap hit was going to be this year at around 22 million. And then I think that the prudent thing to then do is to say, look, we're going to lower it this year by a little bit, like we've seen with all these other teams, but then we're going to move and extend you further out, maybe a year, 2 or 3, and have him potentially retire a Bronco or continue on with the team if he's still playing at a high level at the end of that contract.
Yeah, Rich, I wanted to get your insight first because I wanted to see if maybe you and I were on the same page on the subject. I know usually whenever we start talking about something, I usually yammer off first. So I wanted for a change to kind of see if we're in sync. Does that make sense? And I know sometimes you and I don't see eye to eye on certain things, offensive line and quarterback and what have you. But I think that you and I are pretty much intact in terms of the defense, because I think that not only Von Miller getting cleared of all charges was fantastic news for Broncos country, but it'll really bring in to see just how much of a team player Von really wants to be, because after Super Bowl 50, after they won that, Broncos country was just so worried that Von Miller was going to, go to the highest bidder. But he went on record saying that, he wants to be a Bronco for life. He wants to play with the Broncos. He wants his career to hopefully end as a Bronco and not, anywhere else. So I'm really excited to see what he's willing to do. If the team wants to ask him, which I'm pretty sure they will, to restructure his contract to kind of get some money flowing back into the team so that we can see what Paton and the front office can do in terms of moving money around and seeing who they can get in free agency and whatnot. I think that's a fantastic idea because, like I just mentioned before the start of the show, all these free agents, and I just want to say, just come to Denver to everybody. But unfortunately, we can't sign everybody because that's not how the way football works.
If I can just quickly address a couple things super fast before I kind of get into that. For starters, at 6'10", is there anyone you've ever met that you see eye to eye with? I have to ask. I'm pretty tall for a guy. I'm about 6'2", and even I don't often find people that I see eye to eye with. And you got quite a bit of height extra on me. There's been a few. There's been a few comments here. I did forewarn the beard was going to likely get trimmed down. It was needed. My wife is quite pleased, and no, it was not Manscaped. Their products are meant for below the belt, not necessarily the face. But back on the Von Miller thing, I would like him to retire a Bronco. And sorry, just one more comment here from Mundungus. Thank you for coming in. Look, with me, you don't have to ever worry about my facial hair. It grows like a bloody weed. So with regards to Von, when you look at what he can do, I think he brings a bunch of leadership to the team and all that sort of stuff as well, which I think is much needed. I think he's a little bit more of a vocal leader. And I also think that with other guys on the team, his accomplishments, you hear a lot of the players when they go on to these sports kind of shows and whatnot, when they speak of players, even now, Peyton's been retired for like 5, almost 6 years. You still hear players unsolicitedly coming onto these shows and just basically raving about Peyton Manning and his leadership skills, and how when he spoke, you just shut up and listened, right? And I think Von brings that same kind of pedigree, if you will, just because of his performance in the Super Bowl. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I want to kind of touch on something, the very first comment that showed up here from Miguel Santisteban. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, but thank you for coming on and watching the show. He says he's hoping we pick up Butler and Dupree. Now, by Butler, I'm guessing he's maybe saying Malcolm Butler.
Malcolm Butler, yeah.
Okay, and Bud Dupree. I think Bud Dupree would be a much better addition to this Broncos defense than Malcolm Butler. Malcolm Butler, for me, he's kind of he's had his 15 minutes, and the fact that what happened in that Super Bowl where he was benched, to me, did a lot more damage to his career than help, because it's a mystery to everybody but him and Belichick in terms of, what happened and what he did that, was enough for the coach to bench him and possibly cost New England a Super Bowl title. But if I had to choose out of both of those, I would say Bud Dupree. Now, Bud Dupree is a bit of a worry because he's coming off of a pretty serious injury. So his timetable would be a bit of a concern for me. I'd have to see his injury report and, what his how his progression, if he can come back and be 100% by September.
I like Dupree. Butler was never the fastest cornerback, even when he was with New England. And my concern is, in our division, we have not only speed, but we also have size. And I think Butler might be able to match well against some of the size. I'm very, very concerned with him against, your Nicole Hardmans and Tyreek Hill. We play them twice a year. So that's the thing. It's one thing when you're against kind of bigger receivers or slower receivers, maybe in other divisions, the further north there in Buffalo and in Baltimore, close to where I live, and whatnot. But that's not what you're going to end up with in our division. We have speed, and on the KC Chiefs playing them twice, he's going to get slaughtered. Dupree, though, I would like to bring in on a kind of a 1 year or 2 year, like with the second year being a team option, kind of prove it style contract if he's willing to do something like that. Mm-hmm. Also dependent on kind of when he can return. And if he can return, come onto our team, basically even starting on IR, I would be open to something like that, because I think he's a player that would at least be worth a flyer, as long as we're not spending, some absolute, crazy number.
Yeah, you know what? And this isn't Broncos related, guys, so don't hate me for saying this, but I did read on Twitter, I believe it was yesterday, that AJ Bouye is trying out for the Raiders. So, and to me, the head scratcher for that one was they just cut LaMarcus Joyner. So that, to me, I mean, obviously, I don't think they both play the exact same position. I think Joyner is a safety. Am I correct? I think he's a safety, but they play in. I'm sorry.
I think he's cornerback.
Oh, cornerback. Okay, I might be mistaken. Yeah. But either way, in any case, I think that Joyner is a better player than Bouye was. So the fact that Bouye is gonna go and play, possibly get a job with the Raiders, and LaMarcus Joyner hitting free agency after the Raiders declined his option is pretty interesting to me, and he could be a pretty interesting addition to a Broncos defense, I would say.
Who, Joyner?
Yeah, I mean, not top priority, obviously, but I'd like to see what he can do in a Vic Fangio defense, but then again, I'd like to see what any cornerback can do in a Vic Fangio defense.
Well, the one thing I will say is, if there is a coaching staff that can resurrect a career, I think it's Vic Fangio and his coaching staff. They have a specialty in the defensive back room. That's their bread and butter. That's their jam, which is also one of the reasons why, for me, when I hear all this draft talk and all that kind of stuff, I'm less high on taking a cornerback as high as some other people are, because I have far more confidence in our defensive coaching staff and their ability to take undrafted free agents or even mid-round players and maximizing their abilities. I mean, we saw an undrafted free agent go from an undrafted free agent to a starter on our team in Essang Bassey, right? And hey Mo, and then we end up with Motley starting near the end of the season for us too. And it's not like they were not looking good. It's not like you looked at them and said, well, we got to get rid of them next year. It was like, wow, they did pretty well, and they were starting to show. And this is you want to hear a real controversial thing. Here's this: Essang Bassey was playing the way that I expected Drew Lock to play, which is I saw more good than bad, and every week I started to see modest steps forward. Right? That's what I expected to see from Drew Lock when he came into the season. Don't get me wrong, he had his issues and he had some problems and stuff like that, but he had more good than bad. And every week you started to see him progressively get a little bit better, and he was playing his position physically, which is the way that Fangio wants his cornerbacks to play, which is important. It's also one of the reasons why Bosby did not do particularly well, because he whiffed on all those tackles.